On today's show of not just the Locked On Padres podcast, but also the Locked On Mariners podcast, I, Javier Reyes, am joined by Ty Dane Gonzalez of Locked On Mariners.
That's me.
To preview this two-game bonanza, talk about the biggest storylines between these two teams having very different seasons, trade deadline acquisitions, how that's going, what are the vibes, what's the playoff picture, all that and more. So let's get to it.
Let's do it.
You are Locked On Padres, your daily San Diego Padres podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of not just the Locked On Padres podcast, but also the Locked On Mariners podcast. It's a crossover Tuesday extravaganza. I am one of your hosts, Javier Reyes. You may be familiar with my work over at justbaseball.com, a fantastic website, or my podcast, Baseball versus the World, about evergreen baseball topics, to which my guest on today's show was actually a part of. Of course,
That's right.
Before we get to him, want to shout out, go follow the Twitter page for not just me, at Javapeno, the best handle in the game, JAVIIPENO, but also at L_Padres. Follow the show wherever you get your podcasts from, YouTube as well. Same thing goes for Locked On Mariners. Very, very good show. Ty, my man, how are you doing on this fine? We're recording this on Monday, September 9th, in anticipation of this two-game series starting on Tuesday. Man, how you feeling, man? How you doing?
Coming off of the first weekend of football, and you and I talked about this before we recorded. We're both 1-0. Both of our teams went 1-0 this past weekend, so feeling good about that. With regards to the Mariners, I mean, they're playing better lately, but is it too little too late? I guess we'll get into that a little bit here on this show.
We absolutely will. First, let me just tell you guys, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of, speaking of, NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Yeah, man. I mean, it seems like for the Mariners, they made one of a pretty big splash at this year's deadline, trading for Randy Arozarena. And they've been a team that has been on the outside looking in, but they've had some great moments. Julio Rodriguez, of course, a star, although he's becoming a weird second half merchant, dare I say. But even still, some weird vibes for the Mariners so far this season. And then you have, of course, the Randy Arozarena trade, which was, pretty big of a splash, all things considered. But as of right now, my team looking like they're making the playoffs. Mariners, not so much. What can you tell us about what it's been like, not just as the season as a whole, but especially as of late and the vibes heading into this two-game set?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone knows, not just in Seattle, but across the baseball world, that this team had a 10-game lead in the AL West, and then they promptly blew it in record fashion. And since then, they've been trying to just kind of stay above water, and they've kind of done that. Like, they're kind of at a place now where they just won't fully let the hopes die, right? Now, I think for a lot of people, like, the hope has been killed. Like, the hope was killed a long time ago, right? And even for me, I'm just like, I'm past the point of buying in, and I'm also past the point of getting too upset about, the game to game, process of all this. Yeah, they've just been a wholly mediocre at best offense to one of the worst historically. Over the course of this year. I mean, for a while there, they were getting dangerously close to the worst team batting average of all time in like the 150 plus years that we've been tracking stats in baseball. So, when that's happening, that's obviously your team's not really in a good spot. This pitching has been great, at least at home. They've been significantly worse on the road, but they've still been the sole reason that this team is even relevant in the playoff conversation right now. And it's just been, on a night-to-night basis, what are you going to get out of this offense? Now, since Dan Wilson and Edgar Martinez have taken over in the clubhouse, things have overall been a bit better offensively. There have still been the instances where the offense has really struggled. They've had opportunities to score. They can't find ways to push guys across the plate. and then they lose, right? But this road trip was kind of a mixed bag. Like, they still got shut out on Saturday by the Cardinals, but they also put up 10 plus hits multiple times over the course of this road trip. They scored 16 runs in Oakland. They scored 10 runs yesterday to secure a series win in St. Louis. So right now it's just, I don't really know what kind of version of this team we're going to get. But the Twins continue to lose, and the Astros they're weird, man. Like they'll look unbeatable, and then they'll get swept by the Reds for some reason. So I don't really know how to feel about them. Like, right now they're not really necessarily running away with this thing, but I think just with how inconsistent the Mariners have been, I would be very surprised if they won this division. And I still think we're getting set up for another one of these years, which has happened far too many times over the last decade with the Mariners, where they're going to miss the playoffs by a game or two. And yeah, I'm just kind of preparing myself for that.
Yeah, and in fairness to, you mentioned that they have been as good away. That is true. They are 32-43 away versus 41-28. So keep that in mind, Padres fans. This game, 2-game set, is in Seattle. And it's interesting, like, when you look at their offensive numbers, they're 14th in the league in WRC plus as a lineup. But when it comes to all the other things, when it comes to the cumulative stats, I think that it seems like, just from afar, it seems like they're just not able to procure and produce enough runs when it actually matters. And when you look at the team, it's, really just, I mean, you kind of summed it up, frankly, but they are 30th in batting average. They are 19th in on percentage, 25th in runs scored, 15th in home runs, which is kind of keeping them afloat, but then 28th in slugging. And then ERA, they are first. They are third and fifth among all pitching staffs. It's kind of feels like this team has gone exactly how it was projected to go, which was going to be a team that was super starting pitching. That was going to be their biggest strength. It's about as good as the rotation you will even see over a many stretch of years. That's how good the rotation is. But this is a team that I feel like the past few years has been counting on a second half supernova from Julio Rodriguez. And this year he's been better in the second half, 112 WRC plus, but that's not like significant. It does not seem like he's able to shoulder the load all to himself. Acquisitions like Randy Arozarena, Luke Raley, it just doesn't seem like they have the lineup help. And like you said, it feels like it's always this team that's on the outside looking in and kind of like a little bit, right behind. They're definitely not a bad team. They're definitely not bad. It's just that, like you said, they're always behind. And then the Astros, once again, because this is just what they do, even when that team isn't playing very well. And even when the Texas Rangers, the World Series champions, aren't playing well, it doesn't seem to always shake up well for Seattle.
Yeah, and like this offense, no, it's totally fair. All fair points. Especially as someone that has watched this product over the last 5 or so months. This team, and you listed some of the numbers. I mean, they're not capable of stringing together hits, and they're not capable of getting the big home run. Mm-hmm. Right, so they're just kind of bad at a lot of things, and that's why they're not really scoring that many runs, right? Like, you can't really rely on the 3-run home run, and you can't rely on 4 consecutive hits to drive a couple guys across the plate. So, like, at that point, it's just, what's going to happen, right? How is this team going to score runs? And it basically is at random sometimes. Like, sometimes their only run production will be, and this would happen in a game in Detroit a few weeks back, they'll walk 4 times in a single inning. They'll score 1 run, and that's it for the day. It's been that kind of year with this offense, and it's mind-boggling considering the talent that you see on paper, right? Yeah. Because if you told me at the start of this season or during the offseason that this lineup at some point is going to consist of Julio Rodriguez, Randy Arozarena, Mitch Garver, Jorge Polanco, Cal Raleigh, JP Crawford, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, I would have gone like, they're winning 95 to 100 games with this pitching staff. Like, they're going to win the division. They're probably AL favorites. And yeah, man, Garver's been a disaster. Polanco's been inconsistent at best. There's just been a lot of pretty significant letdowns this year. And obviously the biggest one is Julio. Like you mentioned, like, Julio just wasn't Julio to start the year. Then he got hurt, and he's been playing through a high ankle sprain, which he's still not fully recovered from. And you can tell that he's still like dealing with with kind of the pain from that at times. But he has played better. He has hit better as of late, especially since Edgar Martinez took over as hitting coach and has kind of simplified things for all the hitters. And, Julio's starting to get to his pull side more, which has helped. He's starting to look more like the guy that we know and love. But still, it's just, like I mentioned earlier, it's still like you just kind of wonder if it's too little too late at this point.
Absolutely. And we're going to talk a little bit more in depth about the details because it's interesting. It's not like this offense in theory should be a little bit better, basically based off of my just like cursory scrolling of some of their statistics on Fangraphs. We're going to talk a little bit more about that, as well as I might let Ty ask me about the Padres. I don't know. I usually don't like him asking me anything, frankly. Never
Right.
enjoy that very much. But we're going to talk about that in just a second, guys. But first, if you want to attend a Mariners game, if you want to attend a Padres game, it's a great app for that. Not the one that I just put there, Stitch Fix, but in fact, Game Time, ladies and gentlemen. It is fantastic. We've been having them as a sponsor of Locked On for a very long time and has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier, filtering out the fluff to show you incredible deals, only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through the thousands and hours and mounds of different seats. They have that going for you. They've got different zone deal things where you pick a zone, they give the ticket to you, and then they give you a discount. They've got flash deals to say you're out and about, maybe you're playing some video games or whatever, and then you're like, you know what? I'm actually free tonight to go out for a game. You know what? Let me go. Guess what? The tickets will actually go down in price the closer as you get, thanks to Game Time. All in pricing allows you to toggle and show upfront. No surprising fees at checkout. They've got seat views. If you're a visual learner, you just click on it. They'll show you what's going on. And they have your tickets covered as well. Lowest prices guaranteed, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So what, you silly scallywags, are you waiting for? Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Again, download the app, create an account, use LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Really simple. What time is it? What time is it, Ty? What time?
Game time.
That's right. Go check it out. And just like that, everybody, we are back into segment number 2, thriving and vibing as always on the Locked On Padres and Locked On Mariners podcast. It's interesting, Ty. I look at the team right now, and I might have been a little bit wrong based on just the numbers. And again, you've been watching the team more than me, and we will talk about the Padres, I promise, in just a second. But in terms of high leverage situations, they're actually 11th in WRC plus this year, which is pretty solid. And if you look at their overall lineup, Randy Rosarena's got a 131 WRC plus. Victor Robles, who Padres fans won't know this, but everyone in sports, they have an athlete or a player that they always believe in, even when it's very true that they're not good. So like, Jeff Green in basketball, these like journeyman players, they were always expecting.
Shout out to Jeff Green, Sonic's legend.
Shout out to Jeff Green. Shout out to Jeff Green. All sorts of players. The Luis Campusano high for me. You always sort of believe in them, but you feel a little bit of guilt. I was a Victor Robles truther for so long. It was becoming a little bit of a bit, but he's been great. So when I consider that, when you look at Randy, when you look at Victor Robles, maybe Randy isn't as impactful defensively as you'd like. You look at Luke Raley, 122 WRC plus, Justin Turner at his age with a 109 in the 122 games that he played. Yes, you've got some struggles from Julio Rodriguez. You had Ty France get DFA'd, and I'm going to ask you about him in a second. But on paper, those offensive numbers with the pitching, and then with the fact that they haven't been historically unclutch. Maybe the offense isn't good historically, but the clutch factor does not seem to be the craziest thing. It just seems like it's one of those teams that I don't know exactly where you go from here. Like, what is the plan exactly for the Mariners to build and be better than what they are right now?
That's kind of the big question right now with this team heading into this offseason, right? Because it seems like on a yearly basis, and right now, the biggest topic is about this front office, but it's been the biggest topic with any front office that has come into Seattle. Is like, why have they consistently failed to bring in quality hitters from the outside, right? But now there have been exceptions to that. Like Randy has been fine, right? Victor Robles has come in and has completely revitalized his career in Seattle. and some guys over the past few years specifically, it's been kind of overblown, their struggles. Like, yeah, they haven't been the guys that you thought you were getting. Like Jesse Winker wasn't at all the guy that you thought you were getting, but he also wasn't a disaster like how much Mitch Garver has been a disaster. Like that's been like he's been god awful in a Mariners uniform this year. Same thing with Colton Wong last year, right? Where that was just an absolute unmitigated disaster. But like the Teoscar Hernandezes of the world, they've been fine. Yeah. They haven't been like what you were hoping they would be, but they were overall fine in a Mariners uniform. But that's still the biggest question here, right? Because especially this year, like that was more of like an individualistic kind of smaller problem over the last couple years. Like Adam Frazier wasn't exactly what you were hoping you were going to get, right? Again, Colton Wong wasn't necessarily like a big offseason acquisition, but he was a disaster. But still, you could live without that. This year, though, this past offseason, they completely overhauled their position player group far more than I think anyone was really expecting. And basically all of those guys except Luke Raley haven't worked out that they acquired in the offseason, and also a couple of the bets that they took on guys that were already in the organization, like Josh Rojas, like Dominic Canzone, like Ty France. Those guys haven't really panned out either. So it's been a rough year in terms of the decisions that the front office made. And so how they proceed, I mean, because this is going to be a big off season for them. I think Jerry Dipoto and Justin Hollander are going to be working at this thing for essentially their jobs and their futures in Seattle this off season. How do they fix this? Because they've been really good at pretty much everything else. They've been really good at drafting. They've been one of the best teams at drafting. I mean, they've turned this farm system into a top 5-ish, top 2-ish farm system twice in the last 5 years, right? They've developed one of the best rotations in baseball, if not the best rotation in baseball, with 4 homegrown guys, right? So they've been really good at a lot of things, a lot of the very hard things that a lot of front offices really struggle at getting right and sometimes never do get right. But there's just this one thing that they just haven't been able to crack the code on. And so that's kind of what their jobs and their futures in Seattle are ultimately hinging upon, because this is what has ultimately capped this organization's ceiling over the last couple of years, because they ended the drought in 2022, right? And it's like, all right, well, now the next thing, like the biggest expectation from this point forward, it's no longer just getting to the playoffs. It's no longer just getting to the dance. Like, we want to win a division. We want to compete for a championship. They haven't done that, right? They get to the 10 game lead this year. They blow that. Seems like they're going to finally win the division. That goes away. And now it seems like more likely than not, they're going to miss the playoffs for the second year in a row after ending the drought. And you're just kind of wondering, like, where do we go from here? Because like time's starting to run out on, how cheap your pitching is. And this is unfortunately not an organization that is willing to spend a lot of money right now. So it's a weird place that this organization is in. And for me, especially as someone that lives in Toronto and has seen the Blue Jays, a bit closer than most people over the last few years, like I'm terrified of winding up like the Blue Jays and how high it seemed their ceiling was, and they never really got there. Yeah. So, yeah,
absolutely. I mean, it's just been, it seems like it's been tough for the Padres, however.
Yes.
Ty.
Yeah. Let's enough about the Mariners. Tell me about the Padres, Javi.
I mean, let me tell you, it's been pretty good. They are 5-5 over their last 10, so this is still an important series. But they are currently number 1 in terms of the wild card standings, with a 1-game edge over the D-backs, the 3-game edge over the Atlanta Braves. Things have been okay. It's funny that they've kind of had a little bit of a role reversal. And when I'm going to explain how this is helpful for the Mariners, if you just want to have a little bit of hope out there, folks, is that one thing the Padres were bad at over these last few years, it was not spending. In fact, that is the reason they kind of blew up even mainstream wise, where you have a bunch of outlets talking about them, is because they were a pretty small, relatively small market compared to other places. And they started spending. You go out and extend Manny Machado. You signed him in the first place. They have Tatis, they have Bogarts, and they make all these crazy moves. But one of the problems with them was depth, and specifically for the majority of seasons was developing hitting too. That was kind of their issue. Whoever joined the Padres, it was very rare for them to find batters that would be better or at just the very minimum, they just want to get worse, right? Like, and that just seems to have been kind of the curse with them. However, this year, you've seen kind of just a total turnaround with that. Jerks and Profar, like, it's just one of the most incredible things I've ever bared witness to in baseball. This was quite literally the worst qualified batter in baseball last year, and he has gone out, still been pretty bad defensively, but he is hitting on a level that is not a fluke. This is not a fluke. If you look at all the expected stats, he's changed his swing mechanics. He's just going straighter to the ball, a little bit different of a leg kick. He's been awesome this year, and better people have talked about that. And then they've also had some under the radar options. You've had Donovan Solano come in and just be a nice hitter. And
I love Donovan Solano. Can we talk about that real quick?
Yeah, please.
How does this happen every single year where teams look at Donovan Solano and they're like, we're good? And
every year.
And he goes into like February or even March and they're like, yeah, we'll just give him a couple $1 million. And then he posts like a 110 WRC plus. Now this year is kind of the outlier where I think it's like a 130 WRC plus this year. But like Donovan Solano just hits. Like it's like a guaranteed like 280, 290 average, right?
Every year.
Every year. Like batting average isn't everything and blah, 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 blah. Right. I'm very much in that camp for sure. But like, there is still value to that, especially after watching the Mariners offense this whole year. Yeah, I would love to have a guy who hits 280 in my lineup right now.
Exactly. And he's been really clutch and huge for this team when at times their stars haven't produced. Xander Bogaerts, awful to start the year, and he's slowly getting back into it, especially post-injury. Manny Machado, awful to start the year. Now, granted, it's been a long time since he was bad, but those beginning months when you have Solano come in, who's actually, I think, at about a 115 right now. He's been a little bit slumping, and he hasn't been playing as much since he came back.
Last time I checked, I think it was like 128 or something like that.
Yeah, but even still, you've got Kyle Higashioka. He has come in and been a really productive catcher defensively, but also offensively. 117 WRC plus this year. He's slugging 512. It's kind of all you could ask for from a catcher, is just be good defensively and give you a little bit of a plus offensively. So you've had him. Obviously, you acquired Luis Arises too, who has been a little bit underwhelming, but as of late seems to be entering that phase of, oh my God, this guy's such a nuisance to deal with. And he's at the top of the lineup. You just get Fernando Tatis Jr. back. Well, guess what? Who was replacing for a while? David Peralta, a veteran, and he performed extremely, extremely well. And currently his WRC plus on a season is 118. So the Padres, like they didn't do this before. Yes, they had the star power, but losing Juan Soto did not have a lot of people excited for this team's offense this year. And then you've had basically the unexpected good performances from their bats with Jerks and Profar, with Donovan Solano, David Peralta, Kyle Higashioka, the trade for Luis Ariz, and then Jackson Merrill, who's been so good. And you have the experience, Ty, of having a rookie of the year on your team. And I want to talk about that in just a second, as well as going over some of the pitching matchups. But first, I must mention to you, I would be remiss to not mention to you guys, it's football season. Everybody knows that. And, maybe you're like, you know what? I want to watch a bunch of football games. And I live in a place where, me particularly, I'm on the East Coast. You're forced to watch the Giants. Nobody wants to do that. Right? That's awful. Well, guess what?
Gross.
Guess what? Oh boy, do I have a deal for you guys, because FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, right now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. So if you're like me and you want to watch the Chargers, or if you're like Ty and you want to watch the Seahawks, although I think that would be in your market anyway. Would it be?
I'm in Toronto personally, so
yeah, okay.
I have to use a package to watch the Seahawks, but
okay.
And if you're in Seattle, you don't need it. But
if you're in Seattle, you don't need it. But if you're like Ty, it's super useful because you actually get to watch quality football and the team that you love instead of being stuck with whatever's you're around. If you're a Giants fan, I feel you, brother. I feel you. I was hanging out with my Giants fan yesterday. He's like, I don't know what to do anymore. I don't even care, and I feel that, but NFL Sunday Ticket is great. With the YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel any time. Just visit FanDuel.com. Download America's #1 sportsbook. FanDuel, it's fantastic. It's there for you. Go check it out. And just like that, everybody, we are back thriving and vibing, as always, into segment number 3 of the Locked On Padres and Locked On Mariners crossover extravaganza. I just teased about Jackson Merrill. I want to talk about it real quick. Ty, I want to ask you, just from the outside, You cover baseball. You cover baseball, obviously.
Yeah.
I really hate, and we actually talked about this before recording, that you got to be kind of like, you just got to be crazy now when it comes to sports analysis, right? And everybody's got to, you're an idiot for thinking Giannis Antetokounmpo is the MVP over Nikola Jokic, or you're the idiot for thinking the vice versa. Well, you kind of see that in baseball right now. You see it in every sport where you kind of got to go one way. Twitter, mainstream sports outlets, whatever. And that's kind of arisen a little bit with the Paul Skeens Jackson Merrill debate. But I'm just wondering, before we get to the pitching matchups, what side are you on? Because for me, I actually, about a month ago, was on Paul Skeens' side. And I was like, guys, I just think that you've seen people like Jackson Merrill before in their rookie year. Solid, good players. But now this man has been on top of all the clutch hits. He just keeps hitting. He's got 23 home runs on the season, and he's just electric every time he comes up. Where do you stand on this debate, though? I'm curious.
So I always favor the guy that impacts the most games, right? So to me, it's Jackson Merrill because he's just playing in more games, right? Now, Paul Skeens has been incredible. Like, don't get me wrong, he's been amazing. And I think he should also get Cy Young votes this year. Yeah,
that's crazy.
But yeah, it's 29 games of impact compared to how many has Jackson Merrill played? 100 something?
Yeah, basically like every game.
Yeah. So, and he also has what essentially we call the Heisman moments, Colby and I on our show.
Okay.
Like some big walk-offs, like Julio in his rookie of the year season had a couple big home runs, home run robbery of Fernando Tatis Jr., which I'm sure you remember.
I do.
Yeah, he had some of those big moments that go beyond just the market that they play in, right? That gets on a national scale. Like you think about the home run derby with Julio a couple of years ago in LA, right? And you got people like Steph Curry tweeting about Julio. That was the moment that Julio essentially won Rookie of the Year, right? It's because it's not just, as much as we want it to be, it's not just about what they do on the field. It's a popularity contest. It's why in some instances, guys who win Gold Gloves, they win Gold Gloves because they're good hitters, right? Not because they were the best defender at their position, right? They're the most noteworthy name amongst all the candidates, essentially. And so to me, I mean, Paul Skeens has definitely transcended just like the Pittsburgh market, of course. Yes. Absolutely. Like I think Skeens, I mean, it's hard to consider anyone in baseball a household name, considering how, poor Major League Baseball markets its players and how poor the reputation of the game is right now. But I think in terms of like just baseball fans and like our little bubble, I think everyone knows who Paul Skeens is, right? Even if you're more of a casual fan. But for me, again, Merrill has those Heisman moments, right? The big walk-offs. He's done that multiple times. He's had a couple of big catches that, you see, on John Boy and you see on ESPN and all that stuff. And I think that stuff truly matters. And on top of that, he's been like a 130 WRC plus guy this year. By the way, has been a great defender at a position that he's never played at before.
Yes, so I think it's the biggest thing.
I think that's incredibly impressive. And I think that should factor into the decision here. Like how remarkable of a feat Jackson Merrill's season truly is when you factor in that position change to going from one premium position to another premium position and looking like he's played that spot for 10 plus years. Like, so I would, if I had a vote, and I don't, but if I had a vote, I would probably go with Jackson Merrill.
I would too. I think that a month ago, even when he was starting off his little hot streak, I was cautionary because in fairness, Jackson Merrill was basically just having a really good rookie year. But it wasn't a rookie year that you'd never seen before, right? And if you compare it to say Michael Harris of the Atlanta Braves for a little bit of a comp, he was much better than Jackson Merrill was a month ago. But lately, the way that he's tapped into power, it's now it wasn't just a mirage hot streak. Right. Like I said, he has 23 home runs now. He has all the game winning stuff. The fact that he transitioned from shortstop to center field, position he never played before, I think means a lot, especially at his age. And Skeens, in fairness, I do think that what he's doing is a little bit more of a unique sight for rookies.
Sure.
In the sense that, I mean, you just mentioned before, like he's literally in the Cy Young conversation. He's not going to.
I mean, and like a 2.19 ERA in this era, right? Like it's pretty wild. Like when you look at what pitchers are doing, yeah. But again, I think earlier I said it was 29 games of impact. It's actually 19 games of impact compared to however many games that Jackson Merrill has played. Let me see here. How many games has it been? 140.
Yeah.
So like that really determines it for me. And that's just how I feel in general about pitchers winning awards like this that offensive players are also up for, like Rookie of the Year, like MVP. It's just you're getting significantly more impact on a day-to-day basis out of those guys. Now, Paul Skeens, I mean, when he takes the bump, pretty good shot that the Pirates are going to win that game. But still, I just, to me, it's Merrill just for that alone.
I don't think it's impossible for Skeens to just go absolutely on a rampage over these last couple starts or whatever. But for the most part, I think that Merrill's got this. He's literally the leader in wins above replacement for the entire Padres team at this point, 4.5. Yeah. He might finish as a 5-win player. So he's definitely surpassed.
Oh, and that also matters, by the way. The fact that he's on a playoff team and Paul Skeens isn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
And Merrill's going to beat it. He's going to beat the not having a famous girlfriend, stuff. So
accusations.
I was about to say accusations. He's going to survive that. And, he had the media thing on his side, but I think Merrill's done too much. But last thing I want to conclude with Mariners, Padres pitching matchups on Tuesday. That's the day that everybody's listening to this podcast. It is one Sir, at least according to the app that I'm looking at, George Kirby going up against Yu Darvish. What can you tell us about George Kirby right now?
He's really struggled as of late.
Okay.
He's gotten hit around quite a bit, and I mean that's going to happen when you have someone who throws as many strikes as he does and stays around the zone as much as he does, but he hasn't found a consistent out pitch. And he's gotten exposed more often than not as of late, and the command at times hasn't been all the way there either, which is pretty atypical for George Kirby. So I mean, I think you can make a pretty strong argument that over the last month or so, he's been the Mariners' worst starter.
Hopefully that keeps up. I'd love that. I would be a big fan of that keeping up. For the Padres, just to quickly say, Yu Darvish, I think that both of these games, these matchups are fascinating. Darvish, not because of the quality, but he's just working his way back from injuries and his personal issue that kept him out for so long. He looked actually okay in the 2 2/3 innings that he did the last start, but you don't know what you're going to get. That does not mean that if he's pitched poorly tomorrow, that it's an indictment on his ability. He's falling apart. The sky's falling, but he's still working his way back. So I think that in terms of what matters more for the Padres in a playoff series, I think this Yu Darvish start is going to be big time. And we'll see, especially against the Mariners lineup that has been a little bit struggling, should be a solid test for him. So I'm looking forward to that. And then the next game, Michael King versus Brian Wu. This is just, in terms of quality, two great pitchers. Michael King has been, I think, personally one of the least discussed pitchers in the National League. The fact that the Padres, in a vacuum, probably won the Juan Soto trade because not only did they get the prospects necessary for Dylan Cease, they also got Higashioka, some good depth pieces, and Michael King, who's been electric. 3.10 ERA on the season, 185 Ks. He's been great, and this isn't a guy who's been up and down. He's probably going to finish in the top 5 or 6 of Cy Young voting. And then you have Brian Wu going for the Mariners. What can you tell us about him?
Dude, I could talk for hours about Brian Wu. I love Brian Wu. So not only is it like the most effortless delivery you've ever seen, he is just straight up dominating guys with just fastballs for the most part. Now, though, we're getting to a point with Wu where he's starting to feel himself a little bit. And his last start in Oakland, he actually kind of threw the kitchen sink at them. Like he started throwing a slider with a bit more regularity, started throwing a changeup with a bit more regularity. Like it's really interesting to see how he's developing, but I haven't looked at the numbers recently. But the last time that I did, and again, like before that start in Oakland, he was almost exclusively just throwing fastballs, 4-seam, 2-seam, which are both incredible pitches. The 2-seam is ridiculous. He had like the second lowest barrel percentage against and like the 5th lowest hard hit rate against. And again, throwing fastballs. Like when guys make contact with fastballs, usually they are hit hard.
Yeah.
Like, and
That's
we talk
usually
so
how
much
that works.
about and you know, we talk about how much George Kirby throws strikes and how much of an elite strike thrower he is, and you look at the walk rates and all that. Brian Wu is like even more so on that. Like, he is constantly around the strike zone. And the one time that he wasn't really this year was that last start in Oakland when he was starting to, you know, throw more off speed pitches. Right. So the fact that he's already doing this with just, again, 2 fastballs really makes me very excited about what the future looks like for him, because right now he has shown against really any level of competition over the, you know, throughout the major leagues, he's been able to not just get by, not just give his team a chance to win on almost every single night, but actually dominate some lineups with just those 2 pitches. So, yeah, I mean, you know, there's been some arm fatigue issues over the course of this year, but it seems like he's worked through those. He's healthy, and he is by far my most favorite pitcher to watch in this rotation right now.
Should be fascinating to watch. The Padres are pretty good at drawing walks this year, and Brian Wu has not been walking anybody, just a 2.4% walk rate on the year, which is obscene. And based on some of the advanced stats, doesn't necessarily suggest that he's been getting super lucky either, on top of what Ty was just breaking down. So really, in terms of just pitching, this is your series. You've got some storylines for both teams to watch. I'm really excited for it because, I don't know, it's always kind of fun playing Seattle. I don't know, there's something about it. So we'll see.
It's because it brings us together, Javi.
Yeah, that's exactly right, man. That's exactly right. For everybody else, stay tuned to the episode. We will be recapping them both on our respective shows. Go check out Locked On Mariners. Go check out Ty on Twitter at Ty Dane Gonzalez, or me on Twitter at Javipeno, the best handle of the game, JAVIIPENO. And until that next time, stay faithful, my Friar Faithful homies, and stay sensational, my Seattle brethren. Take care and stay golden.
Peace.